Welcome to the GSC distance learning session. Today's topic is developing a winning attitude and mental focus while racing. I want to welcome our panel. First up is Bill Draheim with Quantum Sales. Bill is a multi-class national and North American winner. Most recently, he won the MC Scout class as well as the VX1 North American class. After winning the VX1 North American class, he was invited to the U.S. Sailing's Champion Regatta. The Champion of Champion Regatta is a regatta where all the winners of the major one design classes get to race against each other, and Bill was the winner of this as well. So he beat out all the other champions. Next up is Rod Favela. Rod is with Vela Sailing Supplies. He raced with Bill on the VX1 North American Championship as well as his crew for the Champion of Champions. And last up is Marianne Hopper. Marianne Hopper is a Flying Scot North American's Women's Champion, as well as racing with Bill on the VX1 North American Champion and MC Scout Championship. Welcome all. Our agenda for tonight is really talking about the mental preparedness for winning in sailboat racing. So the first thing we'll talk about is preparing to win. So this is all of the things that you need to do before you even get on the race course to prepare to win. Next up, we'll be talking about a continuous learning mindset and how do you transfer knowledge from one boat to another boat? Or when you see one of Bill's Q schools, how do you transfer his discussion around the MC Scout as an example or the Lightning to your Catalina 27 or Catalina 30? Then we'll talk about building confidence so you can win. And then finally, we'll talk about teamwork. As I stated, our first topic is really preparing to win before you even start the race. So, Rod, I'd really like to ask you the first question. As you got ready to prepare for the North Americans and the VX1, can you tell us a little bit about what you did, how long it took, and what you were doing to get ready for that race before the race even started? I'll turn it over to you now, Rod.
Marianne and I, we got along just fine. We all have our different styles, but it is a lot of fun, above all, regardless of how serious the event is. At the end of the day, having fun is a method of relaxation. And when you are relaxed, things tend to be a little easier going, aka faster and better executable. And this is coming probably from the worst guy to say this on the boat, because I gotta say that Bill and Marianne chill a lot, and I get hot-headed way sooner. I'm working on it, but I do think that the chemistry is a main part of it. And probably as the last point, one of the things that I think we can share is push yourself a little bit out of the comfort zone when it comes down to practice. Once you set a goal, just don't wait until the conditions are perfect, because in some events, you're going to be facing conditions that are going to be adverse. So, if we always go sailing when it's blowing 8 to 12, 75 degrees, well, sure, but probably only 20% of the regattas you're going to attend to are going to be like that.
So just do it, gradually, but make sure that you expose and push yourself. That is the main thing. Just push yourself out of the comfort zone in order to build that confidence and that strength as a crew and as a team that you need for the major events.
Hey, Marianne, can you add? You might be muted.
Might be able to add just a little bit to that. So one of the things in the VX and even on the MC that I sail with Bill quite a bit is that I don't always sail, right? The conditions need to be breezy enough for me to do that. And so going into the VX North Americans, sometimes Bill and Rod would go out and sail by themselves. And then we were watching the weather all the way up until like when we finally had to make that decision if we were going to sail 3 up or 2 up. So it's always good to keep your options open. And if you're a crew that might sail, might not sail, right, you're still part of the team, but I wasn't like discouraged that I might not sail.
Talk a little bit more about that, because you do a lot of MC scows with Bill, where they actually, I think they allow you to go on and off day by day. So in a regatta, you might sail the first day, but not the second day, if I understand right.
And Mike, it's even race by race.
Okay.
Right. So we have a standard kind of, our standard mantra is that here at Rush Creek and then a couple of other regional regattas, we just always sail together. And I think Bill will agree it's easier to sail with one person on the boat than with 2, especially when it gets lighter and he's got somebody clunking around. But when it gets breezier, he needs the weight on the boat. And so we always will talk about kind of what are we thinking is going to be happening with the breeze that day. And he will always leave the dock by himself and go out and get a feel for how big the puffs are if it's on the edge. And then he'll make a decision sometimes right up until the warning signal if I get on the boat or not. And Bill, you might want to add something to that.
No, not really. Just yeah, that's the way we approach the national level events, and the whole class is set up that way so that you can put the crew on and off the boat every race, which seems like an advantage for the people that have crew available. But the class is huge, and all these scout classes are huge. I think it introduces more people to the sport by allowing people to crew sometimes. But yeah, I think what Marianne was saying, we always sail double-handed at home just so we can practice as a team together when we're sailing, not at the national level.
Great. How about talk a little bit about boat prep and making sure your boat was ready to win nationals or was it nationals or North Americas? I thought it was North America.
Which class is that for us? The MC class?
Either one.
Probably Marianne and Rod have tremendous skill set in boat preparation, and I lack. I'm kind of at the bottom of the entire nation when it comes to boat prep, so I'm staying away from that and allowing Rod for sure to talk about boat prep because he's the master.
So what you're saying is you're a good skipper. You make your crew do all the hard work?
No, I just had limited skill set. Rod.
So welcome to my world. Now you guys all get it, huh? It's
a great point. One of the things that I actually face in the business, and obviously translate to my own program, is the fact that, hey, do I really need a tapered spinnaker sheet? Do I really need this low stretch halyard? And don't get me wrong, I'm not making a plug here for any special line or not. But the truth is you do. You want to make sure that you save weight. You want to make sure that you save friction. You want to make sure that the bottom is clean, that the boat is light. For those of us that sail on handicap racing, PHRF or ORC, IRC, whatever it is, you know how many cushions you have. You know how many books that you don't read you have there, the napkins, all that stuff, everything adds up. And I get a lot the comment of, hey, this is a 7,000-pound boat. What is this, little book is going to do? Well, by the time you take the book and you take the bottle and you take the 3 bottles of sunscreen and the WD-40 and all the extra dock lines that you carry on the boat, and you weigh them at the dock, you'll be surprised how much weight it is. So while I'm not inviting everybody to become an OCD at the bottom, a little bit of that. You want to make sure that you cover the fundamentals, that your lines are as strong as light as possible, that the bottom is clean. It's pretty much what is out there. And even if it doesn't make you any faster, at least it's not going to make you any slower, that's for sure. And it's not going to be playing with your head. Many times we get psyched about the fact that, well, we have water in the bilge, even though it's not really making a difference, but you want to make sure that your body is dry inside. So keep in mind that while I know that beer and refreshments are important to have on the boat, you'll be surprised how affordable it can be to have a boat in good shape. And the same applies to the sails, right? I mean, you don't need to be buying sails all the time or going, too far on it. But you want to make sure that the equipment that you have, you can rely on, that the things are not going to break, and that the equipment is not the reason why you come back at the dock and at the end of the day you say, hey, how was it? Hey, we had fun. We all know what that means when somebody answers us and we ask about the result of the regatta. We say, yeah, it was a great time. We had a lot of fun. We know what that means. That is code for we sucked, whether we didn't do a good job or, the boom bang broke or the general car. So to wrap it up on that part, we had the fortune, at least on the VX1 North Americas, that we had a relatively new boat. We went over all the details. Bill put together a beautiful set of sails. One of them needed a little bit of retouch, so we did it. So we did our homework. We didn't go over budget. We were just conscious on a step-by-step, making sure that all the points were covered.
Great.
And so I have a couple of points to add there too about that is, one thing I'm in Bill's defense, one of the important things to him really is sails and the bottom of the boat. And one of the things we always do with the MC that I've now applied to my Flying Scot program is when we travel with the boat and we get to a venue, one of the first things we do is wash and rejects the bottom. And I think we did that with the VX, we did that with the Lightning, I do that with my Flying Scot. And then making sure that the main controls work. And then I also have to make sure that I give a shout out in my Flying Scot program is that, my husband, does a lot of the boat maintenance. When we need something done, he's right there. So were the other husbands that sailed on my women's team, and they help me with, again, rejects the bottom, help me get boats ready. So it's always good to be able to tap into people when it's not my skill set either. But something that I think is important especially when you're a skipper and you're asking people to really commit to a program for you, and Rod kind of mentioned it, the beer, the sandwiches, just those are some of the little things that make somebody happy or make somebody want to come and sail with you. And especially at some of the travel regattas that we go to, I always make sure that we have, especially now in the days of Airbnb, it's easy to get a place that's relatively inexpensive that might be close to the venue that you're sailing at. And so I always make sure that we look at that, have a place that the crew knows this is what our schedule is going to be, for whether it's for practice here at our club, whether it's for when they need to show up, how they're going to get there, when the boat's going to show up, what we're expecting of them. So I think communicating with your crew is very important. And then the last thing that I want to say is preparing for the venue. And this is something, whether Bill knows it or not, that he really taught me, is one of the things as we were traveling to places that we'd never sailed before, we would look at the forecast and then also pull up the Google map and really start looking at based on where the wind's coming from, this is probably probably gonna want to favor this side or this side. And I even did a women's regatta in San Diego in February, a place that I grew up sailing in, and kind of study the venue that I'd never done before. And so I think things like that might be helpful. So I'll pass this back to you, Mike or Bill. You want to add anything to that? Okay.
Great. Last thing on this section, I had somebody wanting to know, Bill, you had said there's a lot of people that want to sail with you and you have to turn them down or say no because the thing's not right. How do you know, if you've never sailed with that person, whether to give it a go or not?
Yeah, I mean, you don't always, and sometimes it's actually skippers the wanting me to crew for them also. You know, I'm in a kind of a rare position that I'm so familiar with a lot of the people in the country that sail. I'm familiar with various people's reputations and various people's attitude. But if you don't, if you're not familiar, you know, and you're bringing people onto your boat from time to time, introducing new people and trying to work out whether or not they're going to be a good teammate. Obviously, put them on the boat, see if the chemistry is there. If it's not there after a little while, you know, find a way to maybe gracefully move on and split that part of the team up and look for new people. It's especially in bigger perf boats. You will hopefully have a position or two on the boat that doesn't require a huge amount of skill, and that's a good way to get new people in the boat and decide whether the chemistry is going to work. I think you'll figure out pretty quickly whether or not you have someone on your boat that's going to have the same goals as you, same desires, and same sort of attitude. So those are the things that I always look for.
Great.
Mike, if
I'm going to go ahead and
add
open it up to
one
questions.
point, because I think that was Greg's question. And just to complement what Bill was saying, I think it's a matter of expectations. It is over the time, you kind of learn to get the message, or I don't want to say read between the lines, but you get the point when somebody literally tells you, listen, the only thing that we need is you and we can win. Well, typically that is a risky proposal, right? Because first of all, it's a really high pressure approach. And second, well, it just doesn't work that way, because so far in the common denominator in this part of the conversation has been the chemistry, how we get along, how the teamwork, all that stuff that has to be key. And when you jump on a plane and go, even if you're sailing with the nicest bunch of people, the expectations have to be realistic. So in my experience, it has been make sure that we can manage expectations. If I go sailing and somebody tells me, yeah, we have all the shots to win, but we have never sailed together, well, that is not a realistic proposal. Even if we are sailing with, you know, with the top guys in the country and the world, you know, it's complicated. So if you can hear the message from the crew, from the skipper, from whoever is inviting you or recruiting you, and is somewhat close to reality, I think is the best good sign. And yeah, those are the 2 cents I have for that.
Great, I appreciate it, Rod. I'm going to go ahead and open it up on this section to any other questions. So this is the time, if you need to unmute to ask, go ahead and do that and just ask your questions. All right, I guess there's no questions on that section.
You should put like a timer, Mike, like TikTok. You got 10 seconds. If not,
I know. So, Bill, one of the things I remember, I met Bill when my kids were 6 and 7, and I think Stuart was maybe 8. And Bill came and gave a little speech to our Metroplex Challenge group, where all the clubs got together to participate and race. And he really talked about learning and how do you continually learn and how do you make sure that you're always open and don't think you know everything. So that's what this section's about. So Bill, I don't know if you want to start off with, you know, talking a little bit about that and what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, sure. Throughout my career, I would always seek out people that were better sailors than me, and I was fortunate that I was able to do it. Back when I was a junior sailor in Michigan racing sunfish, I became kind of a top, you know, sunfish sailor, and I got noticed by this guy Bruce Goldsmith, who was a multiple national champion, and he wanted me to work for him for a year or so at a sail loft he had in North Loft in Michigan before I went back to college. And of course, I jumped on the opportunity. I had a chance to learn from one of the best sailors in the country. He probably should have gone to the Olympics the year that Buddy Meldus went to the Olympics and won the gold. Bruce was second at the trials. So I was immediately put in this great position where I had a great mentor. You don't necessarily have to have a mentor at that level, but you always need to surround yourselves with people that are better than you. And after Bruce taught me, an abundance of stuff, I was still able to find people that could up my game from Bruce. I was able to sail and learn from a guy named Dave Ullman, who's arguably America's greatest sailor. I've raced with Paul Forster, who's also arguably America's greatest sailor. And, I'm talking about guys that may be out of reach for many of you, but the point is you will be able to find people in your circle of sailing that are better than you, and keeping your mind open and realizing where you are in the sport and being humble enough to know that whatever level you are at, there are people out there that are better than you and that can teach you. So I'm always seeking out people that I can learn from. These guys probably want to add to that.
Before you add anything, I'm going to jump in here real quick. One of the great things about our sport is that you do get to sail with or against national level sailors. Where if you were playing golf, you wouldn't get to go out and sail against Tiger Woods. But if you're even fairly new to sailing, you get to sail against some of these sailors. And I actually got to race against Bruce Goldsmith in the Blue Nose Regatta down in Nashville in Lightnings when I first started racing 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I even bought a set of sails from him for my life.
Nice.
But it's amazing because I don't know if there's any other sport except maybe like marathoning or something that you get to be on the same course as the very best in the country. So I'm going to turn it over now to you, Marianne.
So of course, Bill wants to like surround himself with people that are better than him. So that's why he has me crowing for him. So, where I grew up in San Diego, and I was fortunate to, my first sailing instructor was Mark Reynolds, and I sailed under, and he's, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, and, and he works with Bill at Quantum. But, people like him, where I grew up, everybody was a very, very good sailor. And I aspired to be like some of them, but, didn't have the resources available. But, since coming here, moving to Texas about 14 years ago, have really focused on what can I learn from this tremendous talent that's at our club here at Rush Creek and even around the Metroplex. And I feel very lucky that I've gotten to spend a lot of time sailing with Bill, with Rob Johnston, with Jeff Grinnan, and and now I'm even starting to sail with Paul Forster a little bit. He's got a Flying Scot now, and he's out there sailing more now. So there's always somebody, and there's always people in our community that love talking about sailing and that always have tips, and you can learn from them no matter what. Somebody's always doing something a little bit differently, sometimes a little bit better. So, Rod?
So, yeah, great point. Great points, actually, both Bill's and Marianne. And one of the tips to this particular subject that I find very valuable every time I'm part of I have the fortune to go into a coaching seminar, is to be open-minded about it. The continuous learning is not going to happen if we think, hey, no, this is the way we do things. This is how we've been doing it for 20 years. Well, in order for you to do that on a positive or productive rather way, you have to have the results that you were expecting. Right? We're not saying that you have to win all the championships of the world, but you need to make sure that if that has been working for you, then it's fine. You gotta keep going, but just be open-minded about it. Growing up in Venezuela, we had a limited number of sailors, and that's my particular history. I did have a mentor, which actually now lives, he's not out, and he moved to the US as well. His name is Eduardo Cordero. He's 8 times Sunfish World Champion. He's a real sailing legend in the dinghy arena. And the same thing, the constant was being open-minded. We are pushing hard against each other. We are learning from each other. And the probably the best thing that I can come up with all this is that there is not an age necessarily that you say, hey, you know what, I'm too old to this thing. You gotta pull that out of the lingo. That shouldn't be part of the way you approach if you want to get better. I'm too old to roll tag this thing. Just don't allow yourself to go into that, because it can be done, and there are ways to go around it. And it goes back again to, hey, let's have an open mind about it and get a method, get a way to do it better. And yeah, Marianne didn't put me on her list, but you know, I am very lucky to sail with these two and share right now the among the talent that we have here in the Metroplex. So every time you find somebody that is constantly a little bit faster, not to say better, but a little bit faster, or executing things a little bit on a nicer way that you have been doing, feel yourself fortunate about it and trying to learn from it and then overcome it. What Mike's point, we are fortunate enough that sometimes we can go to a regatta and we can sail against a bunch of Olympians, America's Cup sailors and whatnot, and we should embrace that rather than saying, you know what, they had a pro on it, and so, you know, I'm fighting for fourth place here. No, it's actually, you have a shot at it. You have a shot at Tiger Woods, if you will, to translate it into golf. So just embrace it and just be hungrier about being able to mingle with the pros.
And I want to just add one more thing to that, and Mike gets a little bit on what you were talking about, and you too, Rod, about being able to sail against the top folks in our sport. But I think it's even another level beyond that for me. So I sailed in did the Transpac right before we moved here to Texas, and we did that race. I did it with my husband, with my brother, with my sister, with my father. And it's a sport that you can truly do with your family, regardless of their age. I mean, my dad is 80, and he still gets out on the boat. My daughters are in their early 20s, and I can still sail with them. And I think that's something that's very special for me and my family. So it's not just the caliber of all the folks that are out there, but you know, it's your internal folks as well. And really, the bottom line is get out and go sailing.
Thanks, Marianne. Hey, Rod, before we started, we talked a little bit about transferring knowledge from one boat to another boat and kind of learning at a macro level versus, you know, pull that line or pull that line. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think it also has to do with what Bob is asking, how we translate or continue that improvement from one design to PHRF. The first thing that we all must think, in my opinion, about the handicap racing in overall is that everybody's going to have its perfect conditions. So different to one design where the playing field is very level and is you against you, basically, in order to prove. In the case of the handicap racing, it's actually more stressing, because at the end of the day, when you're racing in one design, you only need to win by, you know, a quarter of an inch and you just cross the finish line. When you're racing on handicap, you gotta keep pushing no matter what. You always have to be pushing and pushing. So it turns out to be a little more stressful to do handicap racing than one design, even though the perception is the opposite. So the fundamentals are the same. Practice, no matter what boat you're on, is gonna make you better. Now, going back to the fundamentals is make sure that we need to make sure that we don't fall into kind of a buying our victory. What I mean by that is the fact that you spend $3,000 on a bunch of instruments, B&G, for your 30-foot PHRF boat is definitely not going to make you any better. You may be able to read information a little more precise, and when you talk, it's going to sound a little better. But at the end of the day, if you don't get the feeling of the boat and the fundamentals are not there, you're still going to be falling behind minus $3,000. So that's when things can get a little dark. So make sure that the fundamentals are covered, because that's what is going to be taught when you do one design. That's probably the beauty of one design, because it's racing in its pure essence, even though in some classes we see nowadays there is a fairing and changing and stuff like that. Well, that's kind of moving away from the idea of one design. So one design teaches you the fundamentals: proper boat handling, proper speed, proper boat maintenance, proper crew work. And when you translate that into the bigger boat, plus potential any add-on, then that's when you're gonna have success. And yeah, Mike says, listen, I'll be happy to sell you the instruments, but I will be the first one to tell you, hey, you know what? Let's polish the boat and take the bottles of rum out that we are not drinking, and then I sell you the instruments. So that's for sure.
Hey, Rod, can I add to that?
Please.
If you're done, of course.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I always try to give this little speech in all the clinics I've done over the years. And again, this goes back to what I learned from Bruce Goldsmith when it comes to being successful from boat to boat to boat, jumping in different classes or different perf boats or whatever it may be. Again, I was a sunfish sailor, and which meant all I had was a main sheet and a tiller, and that's it. And that made me focus on the basics and the most fundamental aspects of sailing. And what turned out to be the most important, I was unbelievably good at tactics, and I was unbelievably good at trimming the main on my sunfish. Well, I started sailing with Bruce in his Lightning, and I thought, well, here's my chance to learn about all the intricacies, all these real go fast things that make a boat go super fast. Something like the Cunningham, the outhaul, the backstay, so many adjustments on the Lightning. I thought, well, this is how I really get to learn to go fast. And I was quickly amazed after crewing for Bruce a couple of times that the things that I keyed on in the Sunfish were the exact same things he keyed on in the Lightning. All those other little controls were minimal. What he was fanatical about was the tactics, primarily, steering the boat properly, focusing on main sheet tension, how the leech exited the main, and of course the Lightning has a jib, so focusing on the jib sheet, but he was focusing on the primary adjustments. After I learned that and was relieved that the things I learned in the Sunfish I could transfer to other classes, those are the things that I focus on primarily, jumping from class to class to class. I just try to be smart tactically. I try to be smart with the sheet tensions, and that gets me right to the front of all these classes. So although the sport can be overwhelming with all the controls available on all these various boats, it doesn't have to be overwhelming if you control on the most basic aspects that will make you perform at the highest level, honestly.
Thanks, Bill. Along those same lines, I had passed along one of your Q schools to some club members, and it was, I think, about managing your leech tension and your angle of attack with the Traveler, the mainsail. And I had folks say, well, I sail a Catalina 27. How does this relate to what I do? So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, how you translate from one boat to another boat and that type of thing.
Well, sure. I mean, it might be getting a little complex, but as it gets windier in all boats, be it an MC or a Catalina 27, you're looking to flatten out the sails. You're looking to open up the leeches of both the main, and you probably have the blade up when it's windy. And you're also looking to, let the leeches get off to leeward, either through dropping the main sheet down or dropping the Traveler down, and so you don't close off the slot between the main and the jib when the main goes down and it starts to shake and turn inside out because the slot's closed between the main and the jib. Well, then it's also time to ease the jib sheet a little bit. So when the main sheet gets eased, the jib sheet gets eased on the Catalina 27. So when you get a puff, you ease sails out, and when the lulls come in, you trim them in. It's maybe a little more complex than that, but is that sort of the answer you were looking for?
Yeah, and also what I make sure folks know is look at your sail. Don't look at Bill talking about dropping the traveler, he's talking about changing the angle of attack or looking at your leach and whether that's controlled by your main sheet or your vang. You need to understand the controls that work for your boat, but listen to him talking about leech tension, foot tension, luff tension, angle of attack.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the way that you could say it would translate from boat to boat is when you get overpowered in any boat, you're going to open up the leeches when the puff comes through. In a Catalina 27, it might be by dropping the traveler, it might be by easing the main sheet, it might be by pulling on the backstay. I don't know if a lot of Catalina 27s have adjustable backstays, but if you pull a adjustable backstay, that opens up the leech of the sail. So you're looking to do the same thing in all boats when a puff comes through and you're overpowered. You're looking to open up the leeches initially when the puff hits. So based on what kind of controls you have, use those controls, but it's the same theory. Open up the leech initially when you get overpowered.
Great.
Mike, and if I just can add one thing, just merging what actually the question and the root of the topic, that Bill was careful enough not to mention, and so were you, a specific number, right? It's very easy, and we talked a little bit about it before we started the meeting today about it. It's very easy if we can go back to say, hey, I gotta take the shroud or the vang or the traveler, whatever the control is, to a given point on given conditions. And I'm talking about a tuning guide. So this is just a little add-on that the tuning guides are exactly that, guides. It's something that gives us a very close, but still a ballpark for any given conditions based on some research. It's based on statistics. It's based on data that has been collected. And the data applies to certain styles of sailing, certain weights, and everybody who develops a tuning guide tries to find a constant so they can, make it a guide so people can trust it. So bottom line is when you understand and reading your sails, which you might mention about it, read the sails and get the feeling of the boat. Make sure that you're not fighting the boat. And even if you're going against what the tuning guide was saying for a given condition.
Thanks, Ron. One other place in kind of learning and so forth is in practicing. When you guys practice, do you just go out and sail, or do you focus in an area, whether it's starts, jibes, tacks, whatever the area is? Do you tend to focus on one area while you practice, and then maybe next week focus on a different area, or do you kind of just go out and sail?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's safe to say all the above. There are sometimes, especially at the beginning of the campaign, when you decide, okay, let's go ahead and aim to sail in the VX1 North Americans or any boat for that matter. You jump on the boat and you have to be honest with yourself as a team to find out where the flaws are. The best thing that can happen is if you happen to have a faster boat near you that is willing to, at least the first few times, go out with you. That way you can gauge, because when we are by ourselves on the lake, we're pretty fast always, and we do great jibes and great tags until we have another boat we can compare against. So that will be the first thing. It's kind of a scouting of the skill level and the speed level and the tuning level of the boat and crew, and go from there. Then you move on into, well, we feel fine on upwind speed and angle, but we're still lacking on the downwind. It's a constant, right? So then you start working again on the downwind and go out. And of course, you always have to go upwind so you can go downwind, and you're trying to do it right, but you don't relax, but you have a precise focus on doing it. Ultimately, time is an issue for everybody who has to work and has family and obligations. So the base of the pyramid, it always comes down to boat handling. So in absence of everything else, you're not gonna do much by tuning the boat perfectly, by having brand new sails, if going again to the base of the pyramid, the fundamentals are not covered. So tacking, jibing, the proper upwind, the proper downwind speed, the starts, etc. After that is not covered, you cannot move on into the next one, which is a speed, and then the last one, which is the top of the pyramid, the tactics. There is a famous saying that every tactician looks smart when you have a fast boat. And I've been there many times. I'd rather have a really fast boat, even though, I've been saved so many times because the skipper and crew save my boat. If I'm calling the shots, it's easy if the boat is going well. So going back to the original question is, it's a process that goes evolving. You go out, you see what your strengths are, you see what your weaknesses are, you identify them, and then start working to narrow it down. That way you have realistic goals. And Bill, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, just that we largely are not focusing on any one thing on a given day when we go out there and practice. Almost every day we go out there, the conditions are a little different, either different wind velocities or different wave conditions. And so we just try to go upwind and downwind and work on teamwork and work on making the boat go as fast as possible. A lot of people that I suggest that they should practice more, sometimes they get confused. Like, well, I'm the only boat out there. I went out there and practiced and I'm not sure I get better. But you're going to get better. You're going to develop a better feel for the boat. You're going to start to understand when the boat's tripping on itself, when the boat's accelerating or when the boat's not accelerating, even if you're the only boat on the water. You'll trust me, if you're the only boat out there training, you're going to get a better feel for your boat and you will get faster. There's a great example of a guy who had a boat at Grapevine Sailing Club and he raced there some, and mostly at Fort Worth Boat Club. Roland Arthur, some of you guys may know him. He started in our sport late in his career, and we sailed with him some. And he did go to a number of high-level events, but he kept asking me, "What's the best way to get better in a hurry?" I said, "Well, so few people practice in our sport. If you just go out there every single day and practice, you'll develop years of ability over the top of people that have been doing this much longer than you because they don't practice." And sure enough, Roland would go out there nearly every single day. Not much at Grapevine, but you'd see him out there sailing a J80 all by himself at Fort Worth Boat Club with his team. And he pretty quickly moved up through the ranks and became a very good sailor simply because he was practicing, even though he was practicing largely in isolation.
Thanks, Bill. Anything else to add, Marianne?
Yeah, I think to sum up what these two gentlemen just said is really the sailing. Every time you go out, you're going to get better and you're going to learn something. And I will say that even as long as Bill and I have been sailing, even on the MC together, when it's breezy, when we don't sail for a while together, it takes a little bit, kind of up and down to kind of get back in the groove working with each other on the boat. So bottom line, if you can, go sailing.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. Any questions in this area? Teresa, I know you have one.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, Bill.
In the first area, you talked about that you were training against another a skipper, another boat, but you were in a one design there at Grapevine. And Bill, our boats at the 35, the closest handicap to us that's racing with us is we're giving them 60 seconds. You got any suggestions to how you get a little side-by-side work, or do you give someone time to get started and try to catch them, or just any suggestions there?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously that's way more difficult, Bill, than having one design tuning partners. But you still can, and I don't know about giving the guy a head start. I don't know if that would work. I mean, if you have instrumentation on the boat, you might be trying different settings and maybe check speeds based on trying different settings. I think you'll, again, even though it's a larger boat, you'll develop a feel. And I'm sure when your boat feels like it's glued to the water and not going forward versus when it is going forward. So you're kind of stuck on practicing in isolation, but I still think it will reap benefits even though you're not testing up against another boat.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I found if you can find one person, even if they're not your typical crew, that goes out with you and their whole job is either to watch the instruments or watch the crew work and even time, you know, your spinnaker set, your spinnaker douse, those types of things. So you got somebody that's not normal crew doing that for you in your practices. It makes a huge difference when you're doing, you know, practicing alone, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we do practice when we do the seminars is the dowsers. Typically, the dowsers tend to be a little bit more problematic than the coils of the spinner. So one thing that you can do if you are yourself, and this is a pure boat handling exercise, is as you're coming downwind into a fixed marker, any marker, you're coming downwind towards that. When the bow of the boat gets to the mark, at that point you start the sequence of dousing the spinnaker and get the boat turning, ready to go upwind. As soon as the spinnaker is down and the pole is stored and you are on full upwind mode, after you round an imaginary mark, you gauge that distance, and basically that will tell you how far in front before the leeward mark you have to start the sequence in order to do a proper rounding, a timely rounding, and a clean rounding. So what the goal is, trying to make that distance the shorter possible, given the raining conditions. So there is a bunch of exercises that you can do in isolation. Most likely all of them are gonna they're gonna contribute into boat handling for you and your crew.
Thanks, Brad. I've got another question. We've got a few junior sailors on, and somebody wanted to know if you had any advice for junior sailors.
Yeah, I'll do it and then hand it over to those two. But when I was a kid, junior sailing wasn't as structured as it is now. But my little group got very good in a hurry. There was maybe 4 or 5 of us that sailed Sunfish at my club, and we just brought each other's level up in short order because we pushed each other really hard, similar to what Rod had with Eduardo down in Venezuela. And just a small peer group of sailors and that kind of peer pressure really ramped up our abilities. I think in today's junior sailing world, it's so structured that the opportunities are even greater than that. There is a massive Texas junior circuit. There is a massive national level sailing in Opties and 420s, high school sailing. High school sailing is getting bigger and bigger all the time all over the country. So there's probably no good reason not to be able to ramp up junior sailing if there's a desire there. Guys?
Yeah, one thing that I did witness, and especially I did it with Eduardo, he happened to live where our sailing school was. And while, we couldn't go and sail every day, he disciplined himself to sail by himself every day, at least 1 hour. That made him 8-time world champion because he was the only one that had that advantage. So to the juniors, one of the advantages of sailing a non-ballast boat and a single-handed boat is the fact that you are developing feeling, even if you think you're not doing it. You know the fundamentals. Keep the boat flat. As soon as the boat wants to heel, that's when you want to keep it flat. You are developing muscle memory. So if it goes back, circling to what Marianne brought earlier, go sail. We can talk for hours about any particular boat, but if any junior that sails 3 hours a week more than the rest, at the end of the season is going to be so far ahead. And that goes back to what Bill was mentioning earlier. So on a laser, on a Sunfish, on a Pico, doesn't matter what it is, whatever the one design fleet is, on an Opti, go sailing and make sure that you reinforce whatever you already know works. That means good habits, because you can fall into the other side that you don't want to reinforce bad habits. Then that's going to backfire at you. So whatever you know already is good. You don't have to reinvent the wheel about it. Just ask your coach or do the research, and whatever we know works, go ahead and reinforce it. Do it over and over. And you don't have to do 6 hours a day. 1 hour a day, it goes a long way if it's constant.
Mary Ann?
I think I just want to add on, and again, of course, I say go sailing, but I think another thing for you juniors that are out there is something that Bill talked about earlier, is just the concept of mentorship and finding somebody that'll take you under their wing, right? That you can go and you can talk to, that'll give you advice, that might even take you sailing, whether it's on a, you know, on a bigger double-handed boat or even a keel boat. So there's always something to learn from, right, from the folks that are around you at your club or in the Metroplex.
And we've got Lindsay on. So Lindsay, would you like to add anything? She was Mary Ann's junior sailor. Guess not. The only other thing I would add is if your coach or somebody that you're working with tells you something you don't understand it, keep asking until you do. I had one of our sailors that worked with us that went up to Boston College and was one of the top 3 or 4 colleges, especially in the women's sailing, and she was sailing on the A team. And she came back and she said, was coaching some of our kids in the junior program, and she said, you know, I wish somebody would have told me this when I was your age. And I can't remember what it was, but it was something pretty basic. And at the time, we were working with Kelly Goff out of White Rock, and he was coaching for us. And I asked Kelly, I said, how many times did you tell Hannah this? And he said, oh, I probably told it to her 20 or 30 times. Mm-hmm. And the point isn't that, you know, Hannah didn't hear. It's that if people learn in different ways, so the way that Kelly was expressing it to Hannah didn't make sense to her. The way I was expressing it to Hannah, because I'd probably told her 20 or 30 times, didn't make sense to her. But the way her coach up at Boston College expressed it did. And so we hear things differently, we learn things differently. So if you don't understand something, ask another coach, ask another parent that races. One of the things I found, especially in the Metroplex, whether you're at Fort Worth, Grapevine, White Rock, Rush Creek, all of the coaches will help any of the kids. They have no problems. If you're at White Rock and you go up to the coach at Fort Worth, he will answer your questions and spend time with you. So ask if you don't understand something. All right, we'll go. We're kind of running low on time, but we'll go on real quickly to the next section. It's on building confidence. One of the things we talked about, and I've seen, again, 3 or 4 of Bill's videos on this. Bill, a lot of times you'll have a problem at the start, you'll pick the wrong side, and you round the first mark in the middle of the pack instead of the front of the pack. And invariably, by the end of the race, you're always back up to the front. So I want to hear a little bit about, you know, what gives you the ability to keep it going, keep focused, keep moving forward, and, you know, pick up spots over the course of the race.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I like the way that sounds, always going to the top. I wish that was the case, but yeah, well, some of the times. Yeah, I hear you. No, I think, and especially in certain venues, I'm more relaxed when things don't go well in the first part of the race. And those venues being, places like Lake Grapevine, all the other lakes we sail on. In these scout classes, we always sail on inland lakes, and some of them are pretty small venues. And as a result of it, and I'm sure all of you that are listening from lakes in North Texas can attest to, we sail in very shifty conditions. And when we sail in shifty conditions, it gives us always an opportunity to get back in the race, because the shifts are so important. They're so huge, and the velocity differences on the race course are typically so big on lakes that if you're smart tactically after a bad start or miss the first shift, generally there's a chance to get back in any race if you focus again on sailing a lifted tack and trying to be where the velocity is. And, if you're good at that stuff, you're going to get through the majority of the fleet. And I think that's one of the advantages that I have is the ability to do those things on these lakes where we're predominantly racing these days. Guys,
Yeah, and I can add one thing that I've really learned from sailing Phil. Again, growing up in San Diego, it wasn't shifty. And so if you got a bad start, you just needed to be fast to get to one side where everything was going to shift. And it's been a learning curve since moving here and really learning to sail in shiftier conditions. But one of the things that Bill is very, very good at is not letting the boats that are around him dictate what he's going to do. And he's really taught me that is really sailing your own race. It's sailing against the course, not necessarily around the boats that are right around you. And Bill can explain that much better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a herd mentality in our sport. You'll notice in the groups you're sailing around upwind, a lot of times when the boats around you tack, more times than not, you'll see that that group is likely to tack in unison. Part of it's because there actually is a shift, but part of it is people are either lazy or not confident about whether they're lifted or headed at the moment. So reflexively, you see the whole group kind of tack together. Downwind, the same sort of things happen. You'll see reflexively that when a group of boats jibe or a boat jibes, it'll create the whole herd around them to jibe. And you have to have confidence in where you're going. You cannot let these boats dictate where you're going to go. You want to look up the race course or look behind you if you're going downwind, and you want to make sure you're placing the boat where the good velocity is, and you want to make sure you're placing the boat, into a lift. And it has nothing to do with the other boats around you. It has 100% to do with your tactical decisions based on the race course. And I think that's where patience really allows you to do that.
Thank you.
And on that token, if I may add, Mike, you actually put that this part, the building confidence, probably right at the right progression, at the right time on the conversation, because confidence becomes as a result of if we do and we prepare, right? If we go and practice, and as Bill is saying, if you trust what you're doing, and there is a reason why, not you just got a gut feeling, but just a reason why you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, obviously that's going to reinforce. And very quick to your point, Mike, about if you have a bad start, I see the races kind of like a date. Well, I'm a married man, so you just remember that, all right? So bear with me. So it's like the first date went wrong. That's when the start is going bad. And don't be afraid of being epic. All the best sailing stories that you guys are going to tell are never when, we had a great start and we hit the shift first and then we crossed the fleet and we won. Well, sure, that's victory. That gives you the trophy. But there's not a spice, there's no sizzle into it, right? And the reason is it's all the time better to say, hey, we did have a poor start. We were at the back of the pack. We saw all the transoms, all the registration numbers of all the boats, and we just work our way back. So don't be afraid of being epic. Those they are great comebacks because that is just the first date. The start is the first date. You have the chance of definitely improving, and then you fall into the mechanics of how to do it. That's a different topic.
Thanks, Rod. Real quickly, this is a picture of Marianne at the Women's North American Championship that she won, and right here is Bill's beautiful wife. So I wanted everybody to meet Jennifer if you haven't before. So the other side of that, and I learned this sailing lasers. So on our laser series on White Rock, we typically had 15 to 20 boats, and every now and then I'd find myself at the front of the fleet, and invariably, as soon as I did, I would psych myself out, and especially if I was sailing against Mark Babb. I know some of you know Mark. And find a way to let one or two boats pass me when I was, leading all the way around the course. So talk a little bit about what do you do to make sure that doesn't happen? I'm sure you guys don't have that problem, but I do.
Yeah, briefly, I'll talk first. I think one of the ways to prevent that is during the race, analyzing what has happened up to that point. You know, we develop a pre-race strategy of how we want to attack the race course, but every single leg we're developing new data, and we're adjusting our game plan based on the data that's happened during that leg. So if you're in the position where you're winning the race, you probably have a really good sense of how you got there. And if you didn't, you need to have a good sense of how you got there. And hopefully that data you develop from getting yourself in first is what you're going to use to finish off the race. Once you give up on your game plan and give up on the things that got you there and start looking behind you and wondering, you know, who you're going to cover or who's behind you or who's going to pass you, you lose, you know, mentally the tactical stuff that got you to first place. So I would try to continue to focus on the things that got you there and not look behind at the boats maybe coming up behind. Guys?
Well, but there is, Mike, to your point, that getting psyched about it. And Marianne and Bill have said with me enough, they know me. And Marianne is very polite and nice, and she's a very loving person. And she just said, Rod, you're just a little bit intense. And some of the fellow sailors that are here with us, join us, we have sailed together, we have coached together, and they know what Marianne means for sure. One of the things, remember that there is a lot of link to the personal feeling and the personal well-being of the crew for the success of each race. So while you don't want to get dark, trying to avoid to getting dark, everybody reacts a little bit different. So make sure that if you have a escape valve, sometimes it's a joke, sometimes it's throwing a F-bomb or something, without hurting your team, without getting into, again, what I call dark, into getting into a finger pointing to anybody. And that's why sailing single-handed does so well for the skippers. Just open up the valve, water under the bridge after that, and let's move on. You don't want to keep chewing into, well, you know, if we were here, we were there. Well, if we were, well, but we weren't. So just moving on. And this is coming from the guy that probably has the highest challenge of this crew to overcome that point. But, you know, here right now, completely sober, I can tell you that is the best thing to do. And especially learning it from Bill.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or other comments? All right, well, we're going to keep moving on then. We've got one section, and Rod was just touching on it. Our last section really is on building a winning team. So Rod, you were just talking a little bit about that.
Sure. Right there, that picture shows that there was a regatta that we had on 12 meters, all America's Cup boats in Nantucket. And a bunch of the guys were great team members. They were a little green from a sailing skill standpoint, but they were what we call all heart. So the main thing is that when you offer a crew member your trust, that's so rewarding for the receiving part, for the crew member, that the improvement, the performance level goes up extremely high. The attention span, there is motivation, everything starts working. The universe starts conspiring for the crew to do much better. Going back to the example of the VX1 campaign that we did, one of the things that Bill, who is, it's a sailor that I look up to, he just say, hey, Rod, you got it on the part of the boat, on the part of the maneuvers and stuff like that. And that, even though I may think, I might tell myself that I already got whatever it is under control, just listening to that reinforces my confidence, and I have a smaller chance to screw up. Well, I'm pretty good at that, by the way, but it reduces the chances of being serious about it. So building a winning team means I'm going to give time to my foredeck. Let's go over the process. Let's don't scream at them and just making a big thing out of that department. We are all a team. So the human factor, trying to be as positive as possible, and is more necessary, is required even more when things go the wrong way. When things go south, that's when the positive reinforcement is more necessary. And every team, every person is different. That's why the time on the boat is so important with the same people. In our case, we joke with each other, and we're pretty hard with each other the way we joke, and that's the love that is within the crew. That's what actually builds our confidence, and we laugh about it and we move forward. That little push with the elbow that help you get to the next step and solve the problem that we have. So in simple words, just practice, select your team. I will reward hard over skill every day of the week, twice on Sunday. When I don't want anybody to tell me how great of a sailor they are, I don't want to tell that to anybody. I want to make sure that you're open and you're willing to learn. Somebody that is willing to learn is way more lethal as a sailor than somebody that is over trusting the skill level. Because as Bill mentioned earlier, it's endless. There's always somebody better than you out there. So we got to come back down to earth and make sure that that's the way I put it. Reward hard. So bring a big hard crew, the people that's going to be loyal to the program, the people that can put the time to it, and then sail. Handle the mechanics, and then just as you do that, just work on the reinforcement of the positive. And very important, I'm gonna give a little spark to the skippers here. Make sure that as skippers, we never demand more than what we can give on the same position. It's very easy to bark from the back of the boat. That doesn't do any good to the crew in front. It's just going to slow the boat down, just even if you want to measure to numbers. So make sure that if we are demanding something as a skipper, we are able to both teach it and do it as good as we're expected to be done. So it's a fine line, and that is going to really help the crew harmony to remain.
Thanks, Rod. Marianne, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm just that I get very picky now about the people that I invite to crew with me, because I know the type of personality and the people that I want on the boat with me, and as a skipper, and then as a crew, I'll go and sail with anybody, once, twice to get a feel for them. But I've, again, been very lucky the past several years, I think 5 years or so, getting to sail with Bill and Rod and our other gentleman, Mike Brown, that we sail with, and then sailing with my family. But the bottom line is make sure people know what you expect of them. And then if you're looking for people to come and sail with you, and if you're going to commit to going and sailing with somebody, that if you say you're going to be somewhere, make sure you're there and you're, very helpful, and, just don't get in and don't help put the boat away or something. So be part of the team. And no matter what your skill level is, that makes you more valuable to the team. Bill probably has a lot of input on this one.
No, actually not. I mean, I just keep reminding yourselves that, there's no prize money out here. I mean, we're trying to it's an enjoyable sport. We're trying to have a good time. We're also trying to learn, but there's no check at the end of the day. And I think once you realize the only thing you're trying to accomplish is to learn, I think that helps you not get overly stressed or too much of a tyrant. Don't be afraid to take a few beers out there. There's a buddy of mine, Jeff Linton, who's the Rolex Yachtsman of the Year. He always has a pre-race beer. He's a very laid-back person, but he's as good as anyone in the country. I think Rod had made a very powerful point that, be it the skipper or be it one of the crew members, you're all learning together, and you've all had the same success at the end of the day. And there's nothing worse than someone being a tyrant on the boat and not understanding that they also probably have skills that need to be improved. So so try to squelch either personally being the tyrant or someone else being on your boat that's being a tyrant, because you know I can guarantee that everybody on a boat has more to learn. So try to keep it light and just try to learn together.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill, do you, how many natural lights do you have before you leave the dock?
We always have a cooler, and I think that keeps the attitude light. Thanks, Bill.
It keeps it naturally light.
Yeah, keeps it naturally light.
Maybe you're looking for a sponsorship.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I really want to thank Bill, Marianne, and Rod. You know, they gave us a lot of time. They came on about an hour early to figure out how Zoom worked and everything. You know, Bill and I talked a little bit, and you know, I think in these types of sessions, or even looking at Bill's videos that you can find on Facebook, you know, you learn every bit as much as you do going and spending lots of money with another sailmakers university. I won't name names. And you know, and Bill and Marianne and Rod are all doing this just because they love sailing and they want everybody to get faster. So we really want to thank them for their time.
Way to go.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rod.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
It's a wrap.
Thank you.
Bye, Glenn. Nice boat, Glenn.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Come,
y'all.
come sailing. I'm over at Rock Hall in Maryland.
Yes. That is awesome. All right, guys. Have a good night and stay safe.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Hey, Glenn.
Hey,
How you doing?
awesome. How's it going? Hold on, wait 1 second.